Have you ever wondered what's the difference between a colon and a semicolon? Am I supposed to use a colon here? Do I use them just before a list? What are the rules? If so, in this video, that's what I'm going to talk about. Whether you're taking the ACT or the SAT, or you just want to have some good English grammar, this video is for you. My name's Brooke. I've been teaching the ACT for over a decade and a half. I've helped coach students to perfect scores, and we've had students score perfectly on the ACT using our online course, and that's exactly what we're pulling this content from. So if you like this and you want more, if you want to learn about dashes and semicolons and commas and apostrophes and every other punctuation mark, grammar rule, etc., so that you can ace your ACT, I definitely recommend that you check that out at SupertutorTV.com. We also have a course for the SAT, and I've got 2 books on Amazon for the ACT math section. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and now TikTok. If you want to see more tips, definitely plug in with us, and right here on YouTube, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. As always, we have a blog that goes with this video, and you could read some of our tips instead of watch them if you don't have enough time to watch a 10-minute video. I gotcha. So head over to our blog, link in the description. Let's do this. Colon's the #1 punctuation mark that people ask me about, because for some reason, you guys don't all know how to use them. Let's talk about what the colon is. It's the double dot. Some people get confused and they think it's the semicolon. They think it's the one with a little comma. It's not. It's this guy. 2 rules of colons. The first rule of colons. The colon, 98% of the time, only comes after an independent clause. Do not put the colon after stuff that's not a complete thought. It doesn't work. Okay, so #1 thing you have to check when you see a colon is all the junk before the colon a complete thought? If not, the colon doesn't cut it and it's wrong. If you see a colon, you can't replace it with a period. Read up to that point and have all the ideas make sense. The colon is wrong. So that's my little litmus test. Walking on the boardwalk, can I put a period there? Nope, I can't. So I can't use a colon. I peered at the seagulls in flight. This is wrong. This might further describe walking on the boardwalk, but this is not a complete thought. There's no subject. It's just a participial phrase. Wrong. While I was walking on the boardwalk, dependent clause. You can't put a dependent clause before a colon either. Doesn't work. I peered at the seagulls in flight. Doesn't work. Right. I walked on the boardwalk, colon, an old pedestrian zone that captured the enchanting local color. So this one works because I could put a period after boardwalk here. I walked on the boardwalk, period. That's a sentence. That totally works. So #1 rule of colons, only put a colon after an independent, fully stands on its own sentence clause. Cool? Okay. Note, don't believe the lie that colons always come before a list. This whole idea that it only comes after an independent clause really comes into play in a lot of questions that have lists after them, because there's this lie that all your English teachers told you. We have a YouTube video on it. You can go check it out. Lies your English teacher told you that colons always come before lists. That is not true. So just forget about it. Can colons come before lists? Sure, as long as they follow the 2 rules of colons. And I just went over the first rule of colons. We're going to go over the second one in a second. So this is wrong. Some of my favorite snacks are, colon, chips, cheese balls, and salami. Here's why this is wrong. Some of my favorite snacks are, period. How is that as a sentence? Really crappy. And that's why it doesn't follow the first rule of colons. Okay? Some of my favorite snacks include the following, period. So I could include the following. The following is a noun. And then I could put a period, right? I could. It's kind of weird. But this at least is a complete clause because I have verb and then object of the verb. And then I have my list here. This is still kind of clunky though. Okay, we're going to go to wrong here. My homework consists of, period. I can't say consists of. You can't have a preposition and not say what the object of the preposition is and just stop the sentence. It doesn't work. So this isn't going to work. Right. My homework consists of a paper, practice problems, and an oral report. You see how we can just get rid of the colon? So when we have wording such as consists of, for example, such as, when I have little phrases like that, those set up a list already and we don't need a colon. And if we put a colon, it's like setting up the list twice, and that's silly and wrong. So don't use lead-in language and then also use a colon. You need to do one or the other. So I could also say my homework has a few parts. That's a complete thought, right? I could put a period right here. A paper, practice problems, and an oral report. So again, you can put a colon before a list, but it doesn't have to come before a list. And just because there's a list doesn't mean you use a colon. Let's talk about rule number 2, because we just talked about rule number 1, which is that independent clause rule. Whenever you use a colon, whatever comes after the colon must describe, detail, define, give an example of, or further elaborate on an idea introduced in the information before the colon. Often that idea before the colon is in noun form. Not always, but often. If you see a colon and the information after the colon doesn't further explain an idea introduced earlier in the sentence, the colon is wrong. Okay, so here's wrong. I went walking on the boardwalk, colon. Later, I peered at the seagulls in flight. Do you see how this event is not a description of walking on the boardwalk? It's just some random detail of what you did afterwards. So you cannot use a colon here. It's wrong. We have to define what boardwalk is, or we have to explain some more about walking on the boardwalk in some way. We can't just put some random detail that's different from this. Okay, here's right. I walked on the boardwalk, colon, an old pedestrian zone that captured the enchanting local color. So again, here's the noun, the boardwalk, that this describes. Do you see how that describes that noun in further detail? We're going to look at some more examples so you can see how those work. And just a note on the second rule of colons, whatever follows a colon can be most any type of construction, and I mean grammatically. It can be a clause, a phrase, a word, or a list. What matters most is content. Does the information after the colon further or explain the idea before the colon? And here you see this use of the colon here. What I'm explaining is this word content. What do I mean by what matters most is content? What I mean is that it has to contain this kind of information, right? So I elaborate on what I mean by that. This is a proper use of the colon. By the way, when a colon is perfect to use, it's usually right. So because it's so narrow, the number of circumstances in which you can use a colon, if you have that sort of money situation when a colon works, it kind of trumps everything else for the most part. So here are some example colon sentences that show you the different ways that you can use colons. First, Adia had packed all her wilderness essentials, a pocket knife, a compass, canteens of water, matches, and trail mix. So you can see this is a list, and here's what's really important, guys. The list doesn't just come after the colon. That's not the only thing triggering the colon. It's the fact that, one, this is a complete thought. Adia had packed all her wilderness essentials. That's a complete thought. I could put a period there. We could be done, but I'm not, because I'm going to share some more details. Perfect place to put a colon, okay? When I look at this, all her wilderness essentials, I also see that this list further describes that in more detail. So that's why it's really important that we have a break here that's not just a comma. Had I put a comma here, it would sound like all her wilderness essentials are different from the pocket knife, the compass, the canteens of water, the matches, and the trail mix. That this is in fact just another item in the list, whatever the heck that stands for, which I don't know. So this is kind of the perfect way to punctuate this as it's written. But had I gotten rid of this phrase completely, right, all this wilderness stuff, and just said, Adia had packed a pocket knife, a compass, canteens, etc., I would want no punctuation, okay? Likewise, if I had said all her wilderness essentials such as, no colon. You do not use colons after such as. So again, this works because this is a complete thought. This is like a phrase or something that can kind of be delineated out with the list. That's how this works, okay? Next, Thoreau's work holds a paradoxical appeal. While he embodies the voice of a solitary naturalist, his devoted audience is indelibly integrated into the machinery of society. So this basically explains the paradoxical appeal. So because this section is an explanation of this singular idea, you see how this is kind of a noun phrase, just like this was a noun phrase, wilderness essentials. All her wilderness essentials is sort of this phrase that then we explicate, right? And same here, a paradoxical appeal, we're going to explain that out. And this is an explanation, a definition, whatever you want to call it. Perfect place for a colon. Thoreau's work holds a paradoxical appeal. That could also be a complete thought, period, right? Totally perfect sentence on its own. So you see how we have the first rule of colons met, complete thought, then we have, here's an explanation of it. Let's look at the third one. Naismith's game would become an American pastime, basketball. So this is one where I like to say it's like da-da-da-da, basketball, where we're like holding back. So maybe this would be from an introduction to a story about the history of basketball, and we talk about Naismith and how he came up with this game and people were playing it. and then we announce what the game is after we've kind of described it, and it's sort of this mystery that gets unveiled, right? That's another great use for a colon. Remember, a colon can come in front of a single word or a phrase, and that's what's happening here. Basketball is a single word, but it's kind of the reveal, right? What is Naismith's game? Naismith's game is da-da-da-da, basketball. And we sort of reveal it, or we describe it, or we have like a right? Pizzazz, curtain lift. So that's another way that we employ the colon, right? That kind of curtain lift, that da-da-da-da, as I like to say. If you ever hear that kind of da-da-da-da in your head while you're doing the test, that's a good clue that maybe a colon is something to consider. And of course, you have to check the two rules. Does it define, describe, delineate, add more information to what's over here? And is this a complete thought, right? Two questions to ask. Finally, the drawer contained all the materials I needed to get started: pens, markers, paper, and scissors. And again, this is a list. This is very similar to the first one, right? The Wilderness Essentials, same thing. All the materials I needed to get started. What are all the materials I needed to get started? This is a list of all of them. So you can see we can use it with lists. We can use it with a clause. We can use it with two clauses. This is actually two clauses here. A lot of different flexible options on the back side as long as you're defining or describing something. There you go. That's what I have for colons today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, if you want to learn how to do semicolons, commas, dashes, lots more punctuation, definitely check out our online course at SupertutorTV.com, or check out more videos right here on YouTube. We have more tips. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.